He stood at the center of the courtroom, clutching a mop in both hands, wearing a stained jumpsuit, the perfect target for cruel laughter. Mocked, underestimated, and dismissed, the young black boy faced a sea of sneers. But when the judge opened a folder and read out his full name, the room's laughter died into stunned silence. What they discovered next about him would shatter every false assumption. This is a story of dignity, weaponized against prejudice, hidden brilliance revealed, and how one boy's quiet strength left a courtroom speechless. Location: Central District Court, Louisiana. Time: 11:14 a.m. Thursday. Inside a grand but crumbling courtroom, the floor still gleamed under the fluorescent lights, though the paint on the walls peeled at the edges. The echoes of shoes, whispers, and self-importance filled the space, thick enough to drown a lesser spirit. At the center of it all, a young black boy, no older than 15, stood holding a mop as if it were a knight's sword. His shoulders squared, his eyes forward, he seemed almost carved from defiance itself. Behind him, a wave of snickering rolled through the crowd. Lawyers smirked. Socialites muttered behind well-manicured hands. To them, he was not a boy. He was a symbol of everything they thought they had risen above. His jumpsuit, stained and patched, bore witness to hard labor rather than shame. It clung to him like armor, a testament to survival in a world that offered few shields. The judge at the bench, a man well accustomed to arrogance and appearances, raised an eyebrow. In his hand, the next case file rested. Another name, another number, another minor footnote in a system that saw kids like this as paperwork, not people. But something about the boy's stance made even the gavel hesitate. The boy's name was Jamari Lewis. No one called him that yet. To them, he was the janitor's mistake, the charity case, the one who cleaned the courtrooms after hours. He had no lawyer standing beside him, no parent in the gallery, just his mop, his jumpsuit, and a heart that refused to bow. The judge prepared to read the next case aloud. Routine, a formality, a sigh and a sentence. But Jamari shifted his grip on the mop, lifted his chin higher, and locked eyes with the judge. He said nothing. He didn't have to. In that instant, everyone felt it. A current, a disruption, a crack in the tradition that said some voices did not matter. Whispers faded. Scoffs choked mid-throat. Even the marble columns seemed to lean in to listen. The judge, for the first time in years, paused before speaking. Have you ever seen dignity rise above disgrace? His name was Marcus Elijah Brooks. Born in a collapsing housing project surrounded by crumbling concrete and broken streetlights, Marcus was raised by his grandmother, who stitched together what little stability she could after his parents disappeared into a system more interested in incarceration than rehabilitation. Life for Marcus was a series of battles fought quietly. From a young age, he cleaned apartments after school to help with rent. He scrubbed kitchens, fixed leaky faucets, and swept stairwells darkened by neglect. By 12, he had memorized maintenance manuals cover to cover, able to repair almost anything with duct tape, patience, and a borrowed screwdriver. His clothes, often patched and threadbare, became a mark for mockery among classmates. Teachers, burdened by their own biases, either pitied him or ignored him entirely. Despite qualifying for academic scholarships, he was often passed over because other candidates fit better with the program's images. But Marcus loved learning. It became his sanctuary. He spent nights at the public library, hunched over borrowed textbooks and battered keyboards, teaching himself algebra, chemistry, and philosophy. By the time most kids his age were worrying about homework, Marcus was acing community college practice exams, unnoticed, uncelebrated. Despite having no tutors, no mentorship programs, and no expensive resources, Marcus secretly completed online community college courses by age 14, excelling in mathematics, physics, and even computer programming. Marcus had known struggle from the beginning. Born into instability, his earliest memories were of eviction notices taped to doors and cold nights spent wrapped in worn blankets. His grandmother worked double shifts at a laundromat, coming home with cracked hands and a smile she wore like armor. When the heater broke, they huddled together for warmth. When the fridge was empty, Marcus learned to make meals from canned beans and imagination. He grew up watching his grandmother stretch coins at the checkout line, pretending to himself that choosing between food and electricity was just another kind of math problem to solve. At school, he faced prejudice so subtle, it sometimes took years to name. When he spoke too little, they called him difficult. When he excelled too much, they labeled him suspicious. No one looked close enough to see the boy who studied late into the night, who double-checked his homework because mistakes felt like proof for people waiting to doubt him. By the age of 13, Marcus had earned an unofficial reputation at the local library. The boy who finished advanced calculus problems for fun, who diagrammed chemical bonds on napkins, who understood laws of motion better than students twice his age. No one paid attention when he walked into the courtroom that day holding a mop. To them, he was another anonymous face from the projects, another body to push paperwork over. They saw his jumpsuit, his scuffed shoes, the badge of survival he wore with unconscious pride. What they didn't see was that Marcus Elijah Brooks had spent every waking moment preparing to change his story. What they didn't know was that he was not standing there to be erased. He was standing there to be undeniable. Because Marcus knew what they forgot. Dignity isn't something granted by circumstance. It's carved, stubbornly, out of days when nobody is watching. And it shines brightest when the world tries to look away. Have you ever seen brilliance cloaked in humility? Late one evening, while Marcus was cleaning the courthouse floors, a visiting official reported a missing luxury watch. Security footage showed Marcus near the hallway at the approximate time, but never taking anything. Yet suspicion fell immediately on him. No solid evidence, no theft recorded, only the sight of a janitor lurking around the area. Rumors spread quickly. He's just a cleaner, some said. It fits the story. The court officials barely questioned others who had passed through the same corridor. No high-profile visitors, no important donors. Just a poor, black teenager with calloused hands and a uniform stained from work. Marcus's grandmother pleaded with the public defender assigned to him, but overworked and underpaid, the lawyer prepared a plea deal instead of a defense. It's easier if you admit guilt, they told him. You'll serve less time. But Marcus refused. I didn't do anything wrong, he said quietly. I was just doing my job. The story caught no media attention, no rallies outside, no campaigns for justice. He was just another face in a system that lost faces daily. Summoned to stand trial, Marcus arrived wearing the same jumpsuit he cleaned in. No one provided him a suit. No new shoes. Just the dignity he carried despite it all. He sat silent while lawyers discussed him like an object. The defendant, never once calling him by name. Sitting alone at the defense table, Marcus didn't fidget. He didn't cry. He sat straight-backed, hands folded, absorbing every glare, every scoff, every moment of dismissal. Because Marcus understood something most of the courtroom did not. Dignity survives even when fairness does not. The judge looked down at him like a problem to be filed away. The prosecutor read the accusations with casual cruelty, suspicious behavior, unauthorized presence, likely intent to steal. No theft proven, no fingerprints, no missing merchandise beyond a luxury item often flaunted but rarely secured. Still, the presumption of guilt wrapped around Marcus like chains, and so he waited. Waited while people misjudged his silence as ignorance. Waited while his innocence drowned under the weight of convenience. Waited for the one thing he'd always clung to, the hope that somehow, somewhere, truth might still break through. Have you ever watched someone punished simply for being convenient? As Marcus walked into the courtroom, clutching his mop, the symbol of his survival, the snickers began. A group of men in business suits leaned back in their chairs, nudging each other, laughing under their breath. A woman with a pearl necklace stage whispered, "Another one thinking he's above his station." Every snide comment chipped away at the solemnity of the courtroom, transforming it into a circus of judgment. Marcus heard it all. Every chuckle, every pointed whisper, every sideways glance filled with mockery. But he kept his eyes forward, standing proud. He knew what they saw. A boy from the projects, a janitor's uniform, a mop, the easy scapegoat for a story written before he even walked through the doors. But Marcus also knew what they didn't see. The boy who stayed up late memorizing court procedures, who understood the science behind their forensic reports better than most of the room, who had survived battles they could never imagine. The mop in his hand was not a mark of servitude. It was a testament to every night he cleaned instead of giving up, every dollar he earned instead of stealing, every dream he refused to let die. The courtroom's laughter rose and fell like cruel tides, but Marcus stood unmoving, anchored by the knowledge of who he was. Inside, his chest burned with silent defiance. He was not their caricature. He was not a punchline. He was a young man who had worked harder than most of them ever would, just to stand in that room with dignity intact. The judge tapped the gavel once, trying to restore order, but even he smirked faintly, as if sharing the joke. Marcus gripped the mop tighter, not as a sign of submission, but of endurance. Let them laugh. He would not. Because Marcus understood that some battles are not fought with fists or fury. Some battles are fought simply by standing tall when the world demands you kneel. As the whispers faded into uncomfortable silence, he lifted his chin slightly, an unspoken vow that no matter what happened next, he would not be erased by their disdain. He carried no expensive briefcase, no polished shoes, no fancy degree. He carried only his truth, his integrity, and the quiet, furious resilience of every unseen, unheard fighter before him. In that moment, the mop wasn't a tool of mockery. It was his shield of honor. Have you ever seen someone refuse to shrink under the weight of ridicule? As the laughter simmered, the judge cleared his throat and opened the manila folder before him. "Marcus Elijah Brooks," he said, his voice cutting sharply through the derision. The courtroom stilled. The rustle of papers ceased. Even the buzz of the fluorescent light seemed to fade into a tense hush. Recipient of the National Youth Engineering Award, first place in the statewide science competition, certified paralegal assistant at 14, contributor to public safety initiatives for the city of New Orleans. Gasps echoed around the room. The two men who had laughed hardest stared in stunned disbelief, their mouths slowly closing as the weight of the words crashed into them. The woman with the pearl necklace dropped her gaze, fumbling with her purse as if searching for some invisible excuse. Every sneer twisted into shame as the judge kept reading, an endless list of accomplishments none of them could match. completed advanced mathematics courses from Tulane University online, led a peer tutoring program for underserved youth, designed a water filtration prototype currently being piloted in disaster relief zones. Each sentence hit like a blow to the assumptions that had thickened the air just moments before. Marcus remained still, his posture unwavering, but inside, something shifted. Not pride. He had never needed their approval. It was something deeper. A quiet reclaiming of the space he had been told was not his to occupy. The courtroom no longer saw a janitor. They saw a scholar, an innovator, a leader. The judge finally lowered the file. His gaze was steady, almost reverent. And yet, the judge continued, despite every reason to believe in his own brilliance, this young man continued to serve, mopping these very floors, cleaning the hallways you trample without thought. The murmurs began anew, but this time they carried awe instead of ridicule. Marcus did not smile. He did not need to, because dignity, once revealed, does not ask for applause. It simply exists, undeniable and radiant. The prosecutor shuffled papers in discomfort. Defense attorneys nodded to themselves, a few even casting glances of quiet respect. Marcus met the judge's eyes and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Have you ever seen arrogance dissolve into awe in a heartbeat? The judge paused, letting the weight of Marcus's achievements sink into the courtroom's marble walls. He closed the manila folder carefully, almost ceremonially, and looked directly at Marcus. His tone shifted from procedural to personal. Mr. Brooks is not merely innocent. He is extraordinary. A ripple moved through the benches. The former murmurs of mockery now dissolved into murmurs of shame. Then another revelation came. The judge continued, reading from a sealed letter presented by courthouse administration. It has come to light, he said, voice steady but emotional, that Mr. Brooks helped draft the emergency evacuation protocols implemented during last year's courthouse fire. Protocols that ensured no lives were lost. The same people who had mocked him, the same ones who had whispered behind cupped hands about the janitor, had unknowingly survived that day because of the silent brilliance of the boy before them. A heavy, almost holy stillness fell. The two men in business suits who had laughed earlier sank into their seats, their faces flushed. The woman with the pearl necklace clutched the child beside her as if grounding herself. Realization spread slowly through the room, inching into every corner, seeping into every rigid belief that had once labeled Marcus as other. One spectator at the back attempted to clap, a tentative, lonely sound. It faltered in the awkwardness that followed. But it didn't matter, because Marcus didn't need applause. He stood taller, not in revenge, not out of spite, but in the pure, unshakable reclamation of his own worth. He had never needed them to see him to be worthy. But now they did. The judge leaned forward, voice quieter but infinitely heavier. This court apologizes not for questioning, but for failing to see. Marcus blinked once, slow and deliberate, letting the words settle into the bones of the room. This was not a triumph born of anger. It was dignity speaking its own name. Have you ever witnessed the shift from condemnation to reverence? The judge picked up the gavel, glanced once more round the stunned courtroom, and then spoke. "Case dismissed," he declared, his voice cutting through the heavy silence with undeniable finality. But he did not stop there. He removed his glasses, placed them deliberately on the bench, and leaned forward, addressing the courtroom as much as he addressed Marcus. This court owes Mr. Marcus Elijah Brooks not only an apology, but a profound debt of gratitude. A stunned gasp rippled through the gallery. No one moved. No one whispered. No one dared to. The judge continued, his tone solemn and heavy with meaning. In recognition of his contributions to this courthouse, this city, and this community, I hereby initiate the establishment of the Marcus Elijah Brooks Civic Honor Scholarship Fund. For a beat, the room remained suspended in disbelief. Then, one by one, people began to rise. Not in laughter, not in mockery, not in casual curiosity. They stood because remaining seated in the presence of Marcus Brooks' quiet resilience felt unworthy. Even the two businessmen who had snickered earlier rose, their heads bowed, unable to meet Marcus's eyes. Marcus did not beam. He did not gloat. He merely lifted his chin and grasped his mop, that faithful, humble instrument that had once been wielded against him, and carried it like a banner of triumph. He walked slowly, steadily toward the exit. The courthouse doors opened not before a criminal, but before a victor. Not because Marcus sought vengeance, but because dignity, when clothed in truth and perseverance, demands a path be cleared. Have you ever seen dignity not only survive, but triumph? The courtroom moment went viral overnight. By sunrise, while Marcus Brooks had become a symbol of unseen excellence. Clips of Marcus standing tall, mop in hand, filled social media feeds. News anchors replayed the judge's words. Commentators marveled at the resilience wrapped in so much humility. Thousands of letters poured in from across the globe. Teachers wrote, apologizing for students they had overlooked. Police officers sent handwritten notes, confessing to assumptions they had made about boys who looked like Marcus. CEOs of powerful corporations reached out, offering scholarships, internships, and mentorships. But Marcus, true to who he was, did not rush into spotlight deals or television interviews. Instead, he spent his days drafting a plan. He launched an initiative to create scholarships specifically for youth from underserved communities, kids who had been overlooked, underestimated, and unheard. His mission was clear: to ensure that brilliance would never again go unseen, simply because it wore second-hand shoes or carried a mop. Pope Francis, upon hearing Marcus's story, issued a rare public statement. The world often mocks what it cannot yet see shining. Blessed are those who recognize brilliance clothed in humility. Universities around the world began citing Marcus in lectures on bias, resilience, and the quiet dismantling of injustice. Artists painted murals. Authors wrote essays. Activists referenced him in speeches about systemic reform. Yet through it all, Marcus remained grounded. He continued to volunteer at the same community centers that once fed him dinner. He spoke at schools not with arrogance, but with gentleness, reminding students that the tools they carried, no matter how humble, could become swords of change. He never stopped cleaning, only now he cleaned the very systems that had once tried to sweep him away. Have you ever seen one act of resilience set the world on fire with change? Today, Marcus Elijah Brooks is an engineer, a community leader, and a mentor for thousands of kids who see their own future reflected in his. The mop he carried now hangs in the courthouse lobby, preserved in glass. Below it, a plaque reads, "True greatness needs no title." And somewhere, in every courtroom, every lecture hall, and every quiet library, Marcus's story reminds us: never underestimate the heart beneath the uniform. He travels from city to city, speaking about dignity, resilience, and unseen potential. His foundation, Brighter Steps, provides scholarships and mentoring programs for youth who, like him, carry burdens heavier than backpacks. When Marcus speaks, he does not start with his awards or his degrees. He starts with the mop. This mop, he tells crowds, was never a symbol of failure. It was proof that I could build a future with anything, even the things the world wanted me to carry as shame. Photos of Marcus at engineering sites, youth centers, and podiums fill the internet. But the most famous image remains that of a teenage boy standing firm in a courtroom with a mop in hand and dignity in his eyes. Teachers use his story to inspire students. Parents tell it to remind their children that circumstances do not define them. In the courthouse where it all began, tour guides point to the glass-encased mop and recount the day the courtroom saw greatness where it once saw none. And somewhere right now, a young boy or girl, wearing worn shoes, clutching a tattered book, dreaming big, whispers Marcus Elijah Brooks under their breath as they take another step forward. Because once a boy carried a mop into a courtroom and walked out carrying a legacy. If you believe strength is measured by the spirit, not the clothes, share this story. Someone needs to see their own power reflected.